I am a total amateur at this craft. You're about to witness my first attempt at a junk journal. Welcome to my crafting channel. I'm Alana from Upcycling NZ. The very first thing I need to do is to make some extra paper for my book. So I'm going to do some tea dyed paper. I'm just adding some boiled water to some tea bags, and I'll let that steep and cool off a bit before I squeeze all of that tea out. I'll save the tea bags and dry them out. So I'm just taking some A4 paper and I'm dipping it in that tea goodness, and you can see the difference in the colour. Then I'll take some heavier cardstock and I'll do the same to that. It's probably easier in a tray to do this, but I wanted you to be able to see all that colour goodness that's getting into the paper. Now I've added some instant coffee to get a slightly different tone, and I'll do some more A4 paper and another piece of cardstock. With the tea bags I already had dried out, I just open them up, pull off the tag and get all of the tea out, and then you're left with these lovely little pieces of like a tissue paper, I suppose. The darker ones are the black teas and the lighter ones are your herbal teas. So you get different colours depending on the tea that you use. So next I'm going to take a piece of paper stock, and I'm going to find all the green and brown coloured tea bags for this. And I'm using a light blue heavy paper stock, and I'll use PVA glue to glue these down. I'm using a really thin layer of glue. I'm scared that the paper might curl up if it gets too wet. And then I'm putting a layer of glue over the top as well. And there's one of my book pages completed. I'll let that dry. The next one I'm using just paper towels, and because they're so thin I'm just going to put these on with a glue stick onto another piece of paper stock. I already have a plan in mind for my book when it's completed, so I'm sticking to neutral and natural colours and greens, colours of nature. For the next page I'm using paper scraps which have been coffee dyed, and I'll just use some plains and some prints for this piece. I'm using PVA glue on this one as well, and I'll set that aside to dry. Next piece has a nice sort of stripy pattern on one side, and I'll use the glue stick and apply some more paper towel to this one. And I've attached some coffee dyed shiny papers and a page in the middle. And now my tea and coffee dyed papers are dry, and I think they've turned out amazing. I'm pretty happy with that. Now I'll fold each of these in half, making them an A5 size, and I'm going to put a nice crisp fold in them using my little plastic palette knife. Then I'll pop a book on these to flatten them out while I work on something else. These are some scrap bits of paper that I had in my stash, cardboard and paper, and I'm going to fold all those in half in the same way. These are all in A4 size or smaller. And I'm going to mix and match them in the pages that I have already prepared. So while I was doing research for my first ever junk book, I learned that each section inside the book when you construct it is called a signature. So I've made 4 signatures. Now my handmade papers are ready. I'm going to cut them down to an A4 size, and you'll see I did a leafy stencil on some music paper on the back of one while I was off camera. I'm selecting the best part to cut out for my A4 size, and I'll keep those other offcuts for scrapbooking in the future. I think once I've folded these and added them to my signatures, my book's going to be thick enough. I don't want to go too big for my first time. So I've learnt how to put my book together from Natasha from Treasure Books on YouTube. She is an absolute master, and she's recently done a tutorial on how to put them together, and I'm going for the tying your signatures together, and with this one I'm using a piece of gold elastic, and I've left a little loop at the top so that I can add any embellishments that I want to later on. I'll do the next one in black elastic. I'll link Natasha's channel in the description below because her tutorials are so well explained, and she shows you several ways to put a junk journal together. So I guess we'll see how much I've learned based on what you think of my finished book. I'm using cooking twine here, and I've wound that around 4 times, and I'm tying it nice and tight. And the way Natasha does it is she separates 2 either side of the crease in the middle. For the next one, I'm using this old piece of jewellery, and I don't know what it had on it, but it's several pieces of green twine, and I'm just going to connect it with an eyelet and place that near the top, and again I'll separate those threads. I've decided I'll use a piece of leather from my stash for the spine of my book, and it was at this point I realised I made my first mistake. I don't want to be gluing my coloured pages to the front of my book. I want one of the plain cardboard pages there. So the beauty of tying your signatures together is that you can remove them and move them around if you need to. Now I'm going to connect my signatures together with PVA glue, but I'm going to measure 10 centimetres from the fold on each side of each of the signatures because I don't want those parts glued. I have yet to fully understand why, but it has something to do with the way the pages lay flat when you open the book. And before I make my second big mistake, I'm checking for any pages that might be the wrong way around. If they have text on them or music on them, I want that the right way around. So now I'm going to glue all of the page other than the 10 centimetres which I've marked. And I'll connect signature 1 to signature 2 and so on. I'll apply a lot of pressure to the signatures, and then I'll fold it open, and I'm going to run my plastic spatula across it to ensure good adhesion with the glue. And this part was so satisfying, watching all of my pages lining up. I may in fact be officially hooked on this hobby. Let's see if I'm still feeling that way when I've completed the entire contents of my book when it's finished. Now I'm cutting my leather down to size, and trust the process. This is going to look a little bit masculine at first, but it's actually a nature themed junk book. And now I'll show you my inspiration for this journal. This is a $1 book from a thrift store, but it actually was fill a bag for $1, so nobody wanted it. So please forgive me, I'm going to pull this book to bits because I want to use the inside covers because I love the artwork, and I'm going to use those for the front and back cover of my junk book. This video will be part 1 of my junk journaling journey. It'll be the making of the book, and then part 2 you'll see what I do with the contents of this thrifted book because I'm not going to let that go to waste either. There's no way that my paper cutter is going to cut through this thick cardboard, but what I am going to do is score a nice, tidy, straight line in the right place on both pieces. That'll allow me to be able to run my Stanley knife easily and straight through it to cut it open. Kind of freaky, but can you see the 2 faces in those bits of board? I don't want that white to show around the edges, so I'm just going to glue some tea bags to cover the white and make it a nice sepia toned colour. I'm keeping this nice and tidy because don't forget these are going to be the front cover of my book. Now I might be being a bit anal, but the edges which are green and didn't have a white trim on them, I'm going to paint them white so that they match the rest of the border. I'm not being very junky yet, am I? We'll see how it goes further in the book. So I've just used a bit of white chalk paint for this. It dries nice and fast, and it's only going to get glued over and more tea bag put on it. So the raw edge of these cardboard pieces are thicker than the leather, so when they're put together there's a slight level difference which I'll have to fix. Meanwhile, I was thinking I'll just glue all of the tea bags to the back of the panels. I also realised at this point that if I wanted to put any embellishments on the front, I'd better do it before I attach those to the book. So I had these little moulds, they're actually for icing on cakes, and I'll cut out one of these, and I think I might paint it. And I'm just using a black paint remnant to paint this black. So I think I'll put this on the front, and I need a border to go around it. So I found some gold cardstock, and I'll just measure that out before I give it a second coat of paint. Then I can draw slightly inside of those lines and do the cutout for the front. So I've already decided that this will be a keeper, this journal. If it's my first ever one and I get into it and I end up making lots of them, I'd want to have kept my first one. So I'll just trim these longer ends with my decorative edge cutting scissors, and that'll be ready to stick on. Yep, I'm really liking that. I put a rather misshapen eyelet into my leather, and I'm going to glue that 10 centimetres away from the edge again. So I'll just measure that out. I used liquid nails for the glue on my leather. It probably wasn't the right one because I had to go back and add some PVA glue to really hold the edges down. I pushed it up as close to the spine of the book as possible. And then I had a couple of big dog clips which helped me keep that in place. And then I just popped some heavy books on top and set it aside to dry. Back to the front of my book, I'm taking the little icing mould and I'm going to highlight the design on the front of it with some copper rub and buff, and then set that inside the little frame. Then I have these gorgeous little copper dragonflies which are actually brat pins. To put it all together, I'm just using my glue stick to put the little icing mould on the front, closer to where the leather side of the book will be. I place the frame over the top, and using the end of a protractor, I'm pushing holes where I want the brat pins to go through. I've arranged them nicely on the frame, and then I'm using a pointy tool to push through holes through the harder cardboard and just flattening the back side of those holes. Then I can glue the frame on, pushing the brat pins through to the back of the cardboard panel. Once I'd folded back the pins on the back of my brats, I could tell that this was going to be nice and secure on the front of my book. And now that that's looking just awesome, I'm going to remove any extra glue that's showing on my front panel. And before I glue it to my book, I need to put in some ties, and I'm using this coffee stained lace. It's a cotton lace, and I'm heavily gluing my front signature of the book. Then I'll add the lace across the front of my signature and make sure I've got plenty of glue on that to take the cardboard. I'll apply some pressure, and that's the front cover attached. I'll do the same to the back, and then apply pressure and allow it to dry. So the solution I came up for raising the leather to the level of the cardboard was to add another piece of lace with hot glue along the edge of my cardboard panel. This has added some strength and structure to the floppiness between the cardboard and the leather. And I'll just tidy off the end. And then on the back cover I'll do exactly the same thing, but this time I'm using a twine fringe. And I only used the hot glue for the seam so that it buttered up nicely against the cardboard. And then I went back with PVA glue and secured down the other side of that trim and the lace on the front. I'm absolutely loving how my book looks now, and I'm pretty stoked with my first attempt at a junk journal. So I'm really interested to see what you guys think. Have you done junk journaling before? If you have, do you have any tips or advice or things I could improve upon? I'll really appreciate that advice because I am an absolute novice. I really think at this point that I could have done a lot worse. Once that was dry, I used a tip from YouTube where you just use an old book as a blotter pad, and when you mess it up you can rip off a page and start with a new one. And I'm taking some antique wax, a damp sponge, and I'm going to age some of my pages just to tie them all together nicely. Alright, now the last step for my book is to add a few dangles. So I've got a feather here, a little piece of bone, and a old pendant shaped like a leaf, which has a bit of a copper effect on it. The feather is actually a moorpork feather, which is the native New Zealand owl. And some of the beads I've used are metal and they make a lovely jingling sound. I'm using some broken jewellery for my signatures, and these are little angel or eagle wing, and some other little broken jewellery that lays pretty flat so it won't cause big lumps in my book. Those are all attached with jewellery fasteners, and on the last one I'm going to tie it on with my cooking string, and this one's just a little necklace with a little diamond jewel in it. I'll trim the end off and then I can walk you through my very first junk journal.
Yeah, they can't have a white baseball cap on 100 the time, but they said they both say mid-20s, kind of light blonde hair, light brown hair, we had a mustache, looks like
Hey, thank you so much for watching and joining me in my journaling journey, part 1. Part 2 will be coming next week. So tune in, my friends, to find out if I've bitten off way more than I can chew, because I have a sneaking suspicion that there's a lot more work involved than I think. Bye for now.